You think you know what cave art looks like. A red handprint, a galloping horse, a herd of bison frozen mid-stampede across a limestone wall. You imagine a hunter, spear in hand, painting the animals he hopes to kill. Simple, decorative, the doodles of a primitive mind learning to hold a brush. But deep in the dark belly of the earth, beneath the floors of Europe and the jungles of Indonesia, there are images that shatter that comfortable picture entirely. There are paintings that should not exist, half-human beasts staring out of the rock. A scene of a hunt so detailed it predates farming, writing, and civilization by tens of thousands of years. And in one cave, on one wall, there is a row of dots and a single hand that may be the oldest sentence ever written by a human being. These are not the scribbles of children. These are messages, and whoever left them was trying, across an unimaginable gulf of time, to speak directly to you. So why should this matter to you, sitting in the warm glow of a screen, surrounded by more images than any human in history has ever seen? Because somewhere in your skull is the same machinery that made these marks, the same ache to be remembered, the same compulsion to point at the world and say, I was here, I saw this, this mattered. We tend to treat the birth of art as a footnote, a quaint milestone on the road to becoming us. But the moment a human being first lifted a pigment-stained hand to a cave wall in the dark, something irreversible happened to our species. A mind learned that it could escape its own body, that a thought could outlive the thinker. The craziest cave art ever discovered is not crazy because it is strange. It is crazy because it is so achingly, recognizably human. And it forces us to ask a question that gets harder the longer you stare at it. When did your ancestors stop merely surviving the world and start imagining it? Let us begin with the discoveries that rewrote the textbooks. For most of the 20th century, the story was simple. Art was a European invention, born in the painted cathedrals of Lascaux and Chauvet around 20,000 years ago, the product of modern Homo sapiens flexing their newly sophisticated brains. But in 2014, a team led by archaeologists Maxime Aubert and Adam Brum, using a technique called uranium thorium, dating on the thin calcite crusts growing over the paintings, dated hand stencils and a wild pig in the caves of Sulawesi, Indonesia, to nearly 40,000 years old. Art, it turned out, was not a European invention at all. Then it got stranger. In 2019, in a cave called Liang Bulu, Sipong 4, Aubert and Broom announced something staggering, a hunting scene at least 43,900 years old, the oldest known figurative storytelling in human history. And the figures pursuing the wild buffalo and pigs were not entirely human. They had tails. They had beaks and snouts. They were what scholars call therianthropes, beings that are part human and part animal. Think about what that means. Nearly 44,000 years ago, a human being painted something that does not exist in the physical world. They painted imagination itself. And the deep past kept getting deeper. In 2018, a separate team led by Dirk Hoffman and Alistair Pike published dates from 3 caves in Spain where red pigment markings, a ladder-like symbol, and hand stencils were dated to more than 64,000 years old. That date is impossible for one simple reason. Modern humans had not yet arrived in Europe. The only people living in Spain 64,000 years ago were Neanderthals, the supposed brutes, the dead-end cousins we imagined as grunting, witless cavemen. They were standing in the dark, mixing ochre and pressing their hands to the stone with deliberate intent. If those dates hold, and they remain fiercely debated, then symbolic thought was not the spark that made us special. It was older than our species. It was a flame already burning in our cousins before we ever met them. Then, in 2021, came a study by Bennett Bacon, an independent researcher working alongside academics including Paul Pettit and Robert Kentridge of Durham University. They proposed that the mysterious dots, lines, and Y-shaped marks accompanying so many Ice Age animal paintings were not decoration at all. They were a proto-writing system, a lunar calendar tracking the mating and birthing seasons of the animals these people depended on. A sequence of dots beside a horse might mean the month in which horses gather. If they are right, then those marks are not art in the way we use the word. They are information. They are notation. You are crawling on your belly through a crack in the rock, and the daylight behind you has shrunk to a single pale star, then vanished. The air changes. It grows cold and still and wet, thick with the mineral breath of the deep earth. Your only light is a stone lamp, a hollow filled with melted animal fat, and a wick of juniper, throwing a small trembling sphere of orange against walls that have not seen the sun in 100,000 years. You can hear your own heartbeat. You can hear water somewhere ticking against stone in the blackness. Every shadow your lamp casts seems to move, to lean toward you, to breathe. You have come a long way to be here. You have crossed frozen plains where the wind cut through your reindeer hide cloak like a blade, where the breath of your companions froze in their beards, where the silence of the tundra was broken only by the distant cough of a lion or the thunder of migrating herds. Your belly has known hunger that gnaws like a living thing. You have buried children. You have watched the great mammoths fall and felt the terror and the triumph of it. And all of that, every season of cold and fear and wonder, has brought you here, into the dark, with a pouch of red ochre ground fine as flour and mixed with spit and fat into a paste the color of blood. You press your hand flat against the cold wall. Then you take a hollow bone, fill your mouth with pigment, and blow. A fine mist erupts across your fingers and the stone around them. When you pull your hand away, it remains, a perfect negative, a ghost of yourself hovering in the rock. By the flickering lamplight, the painted animals around you seem to surge into life, the swell of the cave wall becoming the swell of a bison's flank, the cracks becoming muscle. You did not invent these creatures here. You released them. They were already living inside the stone, and you simply made them visible. And as you crawl back toward the distant light, you leave behind the piece of your own mind, fixed in the dark, to outlast you by 40,000 years. Here is the twist, the thing that should make the hair on your arms rise. Why did they go so deep? You do not need to crawl half a mile underground to decorate a wall. If this were mere art, mere decoration, they would have painted the entrances, the bright airy mouths of the caves where people actually lived. But the most spectacular images are buried in the most inaccessible places, in chambers reachable only by crawling, climbing, and squeezing through passages in total darkness, places no one would casually stumble upon. This was not done for an audience. This was deliberate descent into the underworld, an act that cost time, risk, and resources a struggling species could barely spare. These were sacred acts. The deep cave was not a gallery. It was a threshold, a membrane between the world of the living and something else, and the painted wall was the place where that membrane grew thin. And consider those therianthropes again, the lion-headed humans, the bird-faced hunters. Around 40,000 years ago, a sculptor in what is now Germany carved a figure from mammoth ivory with the body of a man and the head of a lion, the Mensch, an object that took an estimated 400 hours of labor to complete. 400 hours! In a world where every hour not spent finding food was an hour flirting with starvation. No animal does this. No purely practical creature spends 400 hours carving a being that cannot be eaten, cannot be worn, cannot keep you warm. To make such a thing, you must be able to hold in your mind something that has never existed and never will. You must be able to ask the most dangerous and most beautiful question a brain can ask. What if? That single capacity, the ability to imagine the unreal, is the hinge on which our entire world swings. The same neural spark that fused a lion to a man in the dark of an Ice Age cave is the spark that builds gods, and nations, and money, and law, and rockets, and stories told on glowing screens. All of these are therianthropes of a kind. All of them are things we agreed to believe in, fictions we painted onto the blank wall of reality until they became real enough to live and die for. Your ancestors did not just learn to draw animals, they learned to draw the line between the real and the imagined, and then they learned to step across it. Everything you call civilization is built on the far side of that line. So the next time you picture a caveman, do not picture a brute. Picture an artist crawling into the freezing dark with a lamp and a mouthful of red earth, risking everything to leave a mark that says, "I was here." Picture a Neanderthal pressing a hand to the stone 64,000 years ago, a being we were taught to dismiss, proving that the soul of an artist is older than our species itself. Picture a hunter scratching dots beside a horse, counting the moons, reaching for the future. They had no writing, no cities, no certainty that tomorrow would come at all. They had cold and hunger and the constant nearness of death. And yet they used some of their precious fleeting time on Earth to make beauty in the dark, where almost no one would ever see it. You think you know what cave art looks like, but what you are really looking at when you stare into those painted eyes across 40,000 years is the moment your species woke up. The moment a mind first realized it was a mind and refused to disappear in silence. Those hands on the wall are still reaching. They reached across the Ice Age, across the rise and fall of empires, across every word ever spoken, to touch the screen you are watching right now. And somewhere inside you, in the oldest part of your brain, an ancient hunger stirs in answer, the same hunger that drove them into the dark. The desire to point at this strange, brief, beautiful existence and say, before the lamp goes out, I was here. I saw this. It mattered.